Good afternoon. I'm Jim Sandman. I'm president of the Legal Services Corporation. This panel is about innovations to improve access to justice. The Legal Services Corporation is currently funded with an appropriation of $385 million. More than 91% of that number, $353 million, has been designated by Congress to be granted out for what we call basic field grants. Basic field grants fund the day-to-day operations of the 134 legal aid programs that LSC funds across the country, with more than 800 offices serving every county in every state and the territories as well. But Congress has also created two much smaller grant funds to promote innovation. One is our Technology Initiative Grant Program, created about 16 years ago. The other is our Pro Bono Innovation Fund, which was created 2 years ago in 2014. Each is currently funded at $4 million, but we're doing great things with $4 million, and you're going to hear about a couple of them now. I'd like to introduce my panelists, starting on my right with Nalani Fujimura Kana, who is Executive Director of the Legal Aid Society of Hawaii. To my immediate right is Mark O'Brien, who is the co-founder and Executive Director of Pro Bono Net, which uses technology to empower self-represented litigants and to support legal aid lawyers and pro bono lawyers. To my left is Fang Wan, who is the Pro Bono Director of the Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles, an LSC-funded legal aid program in Los Angeles. And to her left is Julia Wilson, who is the Chief Executive Officer of One Justice, a support organization that provides statewide support to legal aid programs and pro bono programs in California. So I'd like to start with a project that's been funded by our Pro Bono Innovation Fund. It is called the Pro Bono Training Institute. Now, the project that you'll hear about from Nalani and Mark is funded by our technology grant program, but each of the innovations that you'll hear about, they have four things in common. One, they started with the identification of a particular barrier that had to be addressed in order to improve access to justice. Second, they involve many collaborations, a lot of other parties and partners who've come to the table to try to identify the problem or to address the problem that they identified. Third, the solutions that they've come up with are carefully tailored to the particular problem that they started by identifying. And finally, these are replicable projects. We only fund innovation projects if we think they can be exported elsewhere. So I'd like to start by asking Fang and Julia to describe the Pro Bono Training Institute. What is it, and what particular problems were you trying to address? Fang, why don't you start by giving an overview of what the Institute is, and if you could identify the particular barriers for legal aid programs and training pro bono programs that you were trying to tackle.
Sure. The Pro Bono Training Institute is an online training program that we developed a year ago, and it provides standardized online quality trainings for pro bono attorneys in the most common kinds of cases that legal services organizations handle. And the website is probonotraining.org, and what it does is it eliminates the need for individual legal aid programs to develop their own trainings on a regular basis. It also ensures that high-quality, interactive, accessible trainings are developed collaboratively for the use of pro bono. Also, this project was developed to respond to the needs of the training needs of folks in California. And there are two things that we really wanted to address. First is that legal services organizations have limited resources to develop quality trainings for pro bono attorneys. And second, they have very limited expertise with developing trainings that focus on adult learning best practices and technology. So these are the things that we really needed to focus on. And how do we find a better way to not just train attorneys, but also get them really engaged to take on pro bono cases so that we can have them coming back to help us in the long run.
So that's great, Fang. This is a terrific program. It's one-stop shopping. It is a resource that any legal aid program, every legal aid program in California can use to train pro bono lawyers. They don't all have to do it individually. It's accessible anytime, anywhere. It's online at the convenience of the user. And it's high quality, so that all legal aid programs participating can be assured that the resources that they're providing to their pro bono volunteers will allow them to hit the ground running. Julia, can you talk about the particular barriers that you saw to participation in training by pro bono lawyers that this vehicle addresses?
Yeah, so in comparison to the barriers that LAFLA had observed at the legal services level, well, Injustice had identified two barriers from this perspective of the pro bono volunteers themselves. First was that access to training was actually creating some barriers to getting involved in pro bono in the first place. And second, the trainings didn't provide adequate ongoing support to pro bono attorneys as they worked on pro bono cases. So in terms of the first barrier at the front end, law firms were actually reporting difficulty in placing their interested attorneys in pro bono opportunities because each separate legal aid organization required potential volunteers to participate in that organization's trainings, even if the lawyer had already been trained in that subject matter area by another legal aid organization. So nonprofits' understandable concerns around quality control were inadvertently narrowing the pipeline of volunteers. Second, we found that trainings did not provide sufficient ongoing support to volunteers as they worked on actual pro bono matters. Trainings were often done in person only at the front end of a recruitment process, and even when trainings were recorded, they were often lengthy and low-quality videos that didn't allow a pro bono attorney to quickly identify and re-watch specific points as they worked on a client matter. So LAFLA and One Justice realized that the pro bono system at a statewide level really needed trainings that, as Jim said, were jointly created by a network of nonprofits and that were then available to volunteers online, on demand, and in bite-sized interactive modules.
How long is each segment?
They range from between 5 minutes to the longest is 15 minutes.
So these are not the video at the end of the long conference table,
Right.
with grainy and for an hour with a boring talking head.
That's right. That's right.
Can you say anything more about what you picked up about adult learning and how to fashion these things?
Sure. So, when we started this project, we actually engaged in pretty extensive research on how to best train adults. We looked at various training methods from adults versus educational children teaching methods. We also looked into training methods from other industries, such as the science industry and the health industry. And based on that extensive research that we conducted, we kind of pooled together the results. We also conducted pretty extensive surveys of the pro bono community, which includes, legal services organizations, law firms, and other pro bono stakeholders who were interested in finding out what we were doing. And based on that information, we put together our project from the get-go.
Thank you. So I'd now like to turn to Nalani and Mark. You have a very different project in Hawaii. This is all about getting resources to self-represented litigants, and by doing it through courts, through libraries, using volunteers, pro bono lawyers, and technology. Nalani, can you give an overview of what it is that you've done and why it makes a difference?
So we have a four-part program, really. It's we brought legal information to the courts through our self-help centers. And then we expanded those services using technology by creating interactive interviews, which help individuals fill out court forms. And then we extended the reach of that project through partnering with the public library system. And so we were able to get out to about 50 different communities throughout Hawaii. And finally, we did most of this by leveraging it with pro bono attorneys.
So most people think of Hawaii as being very different from other places. it's islands, and they may think that your experience there doesn't have much applicability elsewhere. Can you say something about your concerns about accessibility that you're trying to address, and particularly about getting the libraries involved? Because I think there are actually many parallels to remote and rural areas in more traditional states.
I think one of the things we found with Hawaii is that we really have a kind of a central urban core in Honolulu, and then we have a lot of rural communities similar to other states that have a central urban area, and then the rural outreach areas. You know, the partnership with the libraries, amazingly enough, public libraries have really become kind of this learning centers for communities. We found out there are, you know, public computers there, there's internet access. Our libraries are even loaning little netbooks to people that want to use those resources. And so getting out into those libraries really got us into those communities, including smallest communities like Molokai and Lanai, which are two islands that actually have no full-time practicing attorneys. And so the libraries allow our services to be directly in those communities. While we do have small offices, the librarians also help to kind of augment those services.
So, Mark, can you talk about the technology that's incorporated into this service delivery model for self-represented litigants?
Sure. This is a great project to talk about the role of technology, because the role of the technology really follows from the tremendous human partnerships that are at place on the ground. And the success of the technology is really judged by the degree to which not only do they develop information and resources to individuals, but that they connect those individuals to local community stakeholders and local community organizations that are going to be able to help them on an ongoing basis. This particular collaboration leverages two different cloud-based technology platforms that Pro Bono Net has developed and supports, with support from the Legal Services Corporation, but support from legal aid programs like Nalani's around the country. One is Law Help, and the other is Law Help Interactive. Law Help Interactive is a national online document assembly system that allows for self-represented litigants to use the interactive forms that, court forms that Nalani talked about. What's an interactive court form? Well, you could think something like TurboTax for law. Think something that is easy to use in plain English, that has contextual help, that will guide you through a complex process and allow you to add your voice and advocate for yourself in a process. Those forms have been created by legal aid programs like Nalani's, their court partners around the country, and then are deployed and available. And all of the educational material that goes with that helps people understand the broader context for the problems and feel some confidence in engaging in solving their own problems. Those are hosted on the Law Help Hawaii, which is a statewide legal information website. The Legal Services Corporation has supported the development of these sort of single point of entries for legal aid communities throughout the country in all 50 states and territories. So it's a great technology project because it's a human problem worth solving, and there are partners who are invested in using this in creative ways.
If you haven't had a chance to take a look at what Law Help Interactive has done, I encourage you. I'd like to give a personal testimonial. I volunteer at a clinic here on Saturday mornings sometimes, and I not long ago had an experience with a client who needed to file a motion to proceed in forma pauperis. And Law Help Interactive has a document assembly app for that that is intended to be filled out by the person individually. But he was sitting with me, so I decided I would do it with him. And it led us together through a series of questions that inquired about his income, his assets, his liability, his family obligations, whether he had a car, all very plain language, very easy to do. And it was actually my first time using this myself. And at the end, I hit print. And in response to these questions that I had answered, what came out was a court form that had a caption on it, it had a case number on it, it had numbered paragraphs, it even had case citations that I hadn't put in. But it was something that a judge would recognize and know what to do with, as opposed to something handwritten on a sheet of paper where the judge might have had no idea that this was a motion to proceed in forma pauperis. It's really quite remarkable. That's just one brief example, but there are many other kinds of legal proceedings where this technology is available. They try to focus on the types of cases that arise most frequently for low-income people. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about your collaborations, the other players that you've brought to the table to try to promote adoption of these innovations in addition to helping you get them up and running. Julia and Fong, do you want to talk about who your collaborators are with the Pro Bono Training Institute?
Sure. As I mentioned earlier, we engage in a lot of discussions, statewide convenings to talk about how the Pro Bono Training Institute can better support the various pro bono programs of the organizations that we were working with. And we heard a lot of feedback, and we actually got a long list of partners who wanted to get involved and to support the work that we were going to be doing. And these partners include law firms with pro bono programs, legal services organizations in California, and we're lucky in California in that we have about 100 legal services programs, so we have a lot of folks to train. We also got law schools involved as well, and in California we have about 33 law schools. And the State Bar of California, as well as the Association of Pro Bono Counsel, were really supportive of what we were embarking to do. And, that was just the beginning. And since then, they've been very supportive. A number of legal services organizations have already collaborated to develop the 20 or so, I believe 22 trainings that we have online, and we have another 20 that are in development. And these trainings represent, I want to say, about 40 legal services organizations that have collaborated with us so far to develop not just the outline, but the content of the training, the different modules of the 1 hour training that are broken down into 15 minutes or 5-minute segments. So it's great that we've had so much support since we began this project a year ago.
Yeah, so to give one recent example, the Training Institute has been involved in preparing volunteers specifically to staff pro bono clinics for low-income veterans. And the way that works is that there's one set of legal services nonprofits that work jointly to develop the training content for the Institute website. Subsequently, 3 completely different legal services organizations have then used each of those trainings to develop their volunteers for their own clinics. And that they've staffed 5 mobile legal clinics for veterans throughout Central and Southern California. And those clinics, in turn, then involve veteran service organizations, social service nonprofits, private law firms, and law schools. And as Fong mentioned, we've also have now ongoing collaborations with entities like the State Bar of California to promote outreach, the Association of Pro Bono Counsel for their feedback on the trainings, and also Practicing Law Institute to coordinate training development and delivery.
And tell us about who your collaborators are in Hawaii to bring all this together with all of the different locations in which you have services available for self-represented litigants.
So we've been really lucky in Hawaii to have great partnerships with the judiciary, with our Hawaii Access to Justice Commission, which has really brought structure and legitimacy to the work that we do and has a cross-sector of representatives, including the chair of our Senate Judiciary Committee. We have champions, individual attorneys who have been really strong supporters of what we're doing in the community, as well as judges and our Chief Justice, we call him C.J. Rechtenwald, who has really opened up doors and brought down barriers to getting things like a little closet in our Honolulu District Court for our self-help center. We've also really built on relationships with all of our partners, including the law librarians. And we have the state law librarian as one of our major partners, as well as the special assistants to the administrator of the courts, who's really developed, great relationships with people in Hawaii, being able to pick up the phone and call the head of the public libraries to say, let's get involved in the partnership. And I think within a few days, we were on a phone call with them about how they could get involved with the services. We benefit in Hawaii from a culture of something called not talking stink. or being,
Say
or not
say
bring,
that again.
not talking stink, being in a small community, that you live in an island, so everyone knows each other. People know who you are. The question is always, do you know this person? And, you usually probably know somebody who might know that person in Hawaii. And so it's really come to our advantage. And finally, really for us, it's been having the national partners, having the Legal Services Corporation, who's provided funding, having the ABA sponsor the Equal Justice Conference, which really brought many of the ideas that we're doing in Hawaii. There's opportunities for our teams to meet, to see what's going on, and see ways to bring that back. And also partners like Pro Bono Net, who have the technology and the expertise to help support what we do in Hawaii.
Well, thank you, Nalani. From Pro Bono Net's perspective, that collaboration starts with our local partners. We've had the privilege of working with Legal Aid Society in Hawaii for 15 some odd years now. And those collaborations, the knowledge and expertise that my staff can bring to share with thinking about how to set up service delivery in Hawaii comes very much from the learning that we've done working with folks in other states who are facing similar challenges. One of the real great things about, and it ties to the replication you talked about before, Jim, about having these national platforms in place where a common system is used by people all around the country. So there are folks, like I saw Mark Thoreau here, who's now with the Kentucky courts, but I remember when Mark was with the legal aid program in Kentucky and was developing interactive forms with his program and using that as an asset to collaborate with the courts and think about how to jointly take on the problems of self-represented litigants. And there's collaboration that Pro Bono is able to enjoy with other national organizations. I see other people here in this room. I see Ron Stout from Chicago Kent Law School. He and his colleagues who have developed the A2J Author, Access to Justice Author, which is the interface that is used for a lot of the sort of consumer-facing systems, have been tremendous partners in this. I see the Self-Represented Litigation Network in the room, and there's not always not stink talking, but there's certainly not stink acting amongst the national players too, that really fuels this. And I think one of the things that is really important in thinking about the role that technology can play here is thinking about the asset that it provides to legal aid programs. Collaboration is a great word. It's not always easy. It takes work. And it requires there actually to be something worth collaborating about. And we've seen it in Hawaii, and we've seen it all around the country, where these types of interactive tools and technology resources actually become the locus of a collaboration. They become an asset that legal aid programs can bring to not just the courts, but to other non-legal community partners like the public libraries that Nalani mentioned, and really show that the legal aid community is trying to think about how it can deploy its expertise and its know-how in ways that can be consumed through those other community partners. And so it's a very exciting work.
I'd like to ask about what you do to measure customer satisfaction. So can you tell us about the Pro Bono Training Institute and what your experience so far has been measuring effectiveness among the pro bono lawyers you're trying to train and among the legal aid programs that you're trying to relieve of this training burden?
Mm-hmm. Yep, so the Pro Bono Training Institute is creating tools to gather evaluation data, as you said, Jim, for both the volunteers and the legal aid nonprofits involved, and we're trying to ensure that both the format and the content is meeting their needs and actually being effective in preparing volunteers for their pro bono experiences. So starting just earlier this year, volunteers are asked to evaluate trainings after watching them and then again after volunteering. And we still have a relatively limited data set, but the results are quite encouraging. So across the board, volunteers are evaluating the trainings positively overall, and 91% of volunteers have reported that the trainings actually made them better prepared for their pro bono opportunity.
That's great. And how do you evaluate the effectiveness of your self-help centers, your online tools, and your library outreach?
So we do surveys. As soon as someone receives a service, they're provided with a survey, and we found that we've had 90% success rate in terms of people being satisfied with our services. We actually share that information with our pro bono attorneys, which we found is a really effective tool in getting them to come back and serve because they see the great comments from the people that they assisted.
So I have a question about that. This was discussed this morning at the meeting of the Board of Directors of the Legal Services Corporation. We were talking about the difficulty of following up with people under these circumstances, locating the people that have taken advantage of the service that you're provided. How long do you wait before asking them what their satisfaction is? And how difficult is the follow-up?
Well, we do it immediately. So before they leave the center, we usually do give them a survey. I think that's been a question that we've all been asking. Is there ways to actually utilize technology in the future to potentially send a text message to ask somebody 6 months down the line, how was the services, how does this go? And I think that's one of the things that I'm hoping we'll be able to develop with all the different partners in the room in the future.
So I'd like to wrap up by asking you about replication. I said that's one of the standards for the Legal Services Corporation in making one of our innovation grants, either for pro bono or for technology. What are your thoughts on the replicability of the projects that you've developed in your states?
So, the Pro Bono Training Institute is something that can definitely be replicable, either in its entirety or by scaling it down into smaller collaborations. We found that the folks that have reached out to us are looking to develop a similar project, but with a smaller collaboration. And, we recognize that California is pretty unique in that we have such a large attorney base. We have over 186,000 licensed attorneys. And, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of legal services organizations, law schools, countless law firms. And so, our project is quite large. And, fortunately for us, the Pro Bono Innovation Fund was just such a unique solution that enabled us to work with our key partners, One Justice and Neighborhood Legal Services of Los Angeles, to truly develop a project that reflects the needs of Californians and to really, focus on coordinating a training project that incorporates adult learning best practices, technology, and, most meaningfully, collaborations.
I think you need to tell some of those 186,000 lawyers about Chief Justice Gilbertson's program in South Dakota. And how about Hawaii? Do you think this is replicable, and how?
Definitely. I think, again, as we talked about, having kind of this urban core in a lot of rural areas, which, of course, you can't get to because of the water unless you're going to fly, we're really trying to use technology to kind of bridge some of those gaps, and that's part of the partnerships with Pro Bono Net as well as the support we've received from the Legal Services Corporation. I think that, we try to scale our programs up slowly as demand comes up. Our self-help centers, just to note, we're not open every day of the week. They're only open a couple hours each week. And so, we always try to increase the number of hours as we have more interest and more people that want to volunteer. And that's part of our scaling. We currently have we have law firms committed through the end of 2017 to staff our centers in Honolulu, and so we're expanding the hours based on kind of that interest and demand. But I think the work that we do with our self-help centers, our interactive forums, and the partnerships with libraries, really, if the states get together, talk to each other, don't talk stink, we can really create those partnerships to then replicate in other communities.
Let me follow up about that. How do you spread the word? So you have great things going on if you're hiding your candle under a bushel and other people don't know that you have something that they could replicate, it's not going to be replicated. So what have you found to be effective in sharing your experience with others so they can piggyback on it?
I think we've participated in some of the national conferences, the Equal Justice Conference supported by ABA, the National Lawyer and Defenders Conference sponsored in the fall. They've been great opportunities for us to talk about the work that we've done out in Hawaii and also at the TIG conference that LSC sponsors.
I would agree with the National Lawyer Legal Aid Defenders Association as a big thoroughfare for replication, and also law firms are national in scope, and so as the Training Institute becomes more available to them, we anticipate organizations like the Association for Pro Bono Counsel and those large law firms themselves will become a mechanism for replication.
So you mentioned that some others want to replicate, but on a smaller scale. I think that's interesting because one of the things that was attractive to LSC in deciding to fund this project was because you were thinking really big. Really, that was important. Think big would be my advice to anybody who wants to apply for one of our grants. Well, thank you very much. This event itself is one of the ways that we spread the word about great innovations so that others can pick up what you've begun. Would you please join me in thanking our panelists?